Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you both for being here and for your service to the country. Director Haynes, I want to go back to your comments about the 702 reauthorization, because I returned from, along with a number of my colleagues, including Senator Budd, we returned from South America a couple of weeks ago, where we visited 4 countries, and the 702 reauth came up, or at least the ability of the Intel community to use those authorizations to address the challenges facing the country. And I was particularly interested in the counter-narcotics effort, because we continue to have a huge issue in New Hampshire with the opioid epidemic. So I do think it's very important for us to continue to have those authorities, but there are also some very real concerns about privacy that we've heard. So can you talk to how important it is for these authorities to help us continue with counter-narcotics efforts, and also what we're doing in terms of addressing the privacy concerns?
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. And I think, this is one of the challenges for us has been in the intelligence community, frankly, trying to declassify examples of how it is that we've used 702 so that the public has a better understanding of the value of this authority and the collection that we have. But I'll say, as a general matter, it has been an important authority for use in the context of countering narcotics trafficking, and in many respects used to help support our foreign partners in interdictions as a general matter, and that is something that has been critical. In terms of the privacy and civil liberties pieces of this, I mean, what I would say is, we have a number of things that we do in order to try to monitor and assess our compliance, and then to ultimately design the system in such a way as to incentivize and promote compliance, making it, in other words, technically hard to do things that are non-compliant, and then ultimately have increased extraordinary investments into training of folks who would use the system, and then to making adjustments as we go through the process where we see something goes wrong, and then actually addressing it, and also holding people accountable in the context of any compliance violations. And just to give you a couple of things, on an annual basis, the entire program is reviewed and recertified by the Foreign Intelligence Court, essentially, as one piece. Also, we do semi-annual compliance reports to Congress. We have a joint 60-day review, my office and the Department of Justice, of targeting decisions of any U.S. person queries that are done through the databases that exist, and dissemination. We have targeting and minimization procedures for each element that are not just reviewed by the Attorney General, but go to the FISC court. Again, we go through a variety of ways in which to try to ensure that we've created, in effect, a virtuous cycle where we can ensure that everything that we're doing is, in fact, promoting compliance, and then monitoring it to see if that's, in fact, what's happening, and then addressing challenges as they come and move forward. And then we also have been providing reports publicly about non-compliance incidents so that we can show the American people, we can have all of you and your constituents look at what's happening and see where we make progress, where we make mistakes, how we address it, and then how we move forward on it so that we can actually build the trust that's necessary. Thank you.
Good, thank you. You both mentioned cyber in your, I think you both mentioned cyber in your remarks, but I didn't hear either of you talk about the efforts to address disinformation. And one of the places where our adversaries have certainly been very effective, I think more effective than we have been in responding in many cases, has been in the disinformation arena. Can you speak to what we're doing and how we're coordinating with other operations like the Global Engagement Center at the State Department?
Sure, I'll start, and Chairman Barry, if you want to add to this. But Congress put into law that we should establish a foreign malign influence center in the intelligence community. We have stood that up, and it encompasses our election threat executive work, essentially looking at foreign influence and interference in elections, but it also deals with disinformation more generally. And what we have been doing is effectively trying to support the Global Engagement Center, others throughout the U.S. government, in helping them to understand what are the plans and intentions of the key actors in this space. China, Russia, other, Iran, et cetera, and then give them a sense of what it is that we're seeing in terms of the techniques that they use, how they go about this, and provide that for policymakers so that they're able to take that information and hopefully counter it and address it.
Thank you.
I think DIA's perspective on this, Senator, is really speed. We want to be able to detect that, and it's really with our open source collection capability, working with our combatant command partners where this is happening all over the world, and then the ability to turn something quickly with them under the right authorities to counter that disinformation or misinformation.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Senator Stream. Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for being here today. Director Haynes, last year you testified that, quote, China will continue to essentially expand their nuclear arsenal and diversification for a period of time, end quote. Has that assessment changed, or does the intelligence community still maintain it?
That assessment has not changed.
And in public reports, we've seen that the DIA has assessed that China will deploy 1,500 warheads by 2035. STRATCOM Commander General Cotton has also publicly confirmed that China has now surpassed the United States in the number of fixed and mobile land-based launches for ICBM. General Berrier, do you agree with that assessment still?
I do agree.
Thank you. Director Haynes, does the Intelligence Committee assess that China has any interest in pursuing arms control agreements that would restrict their development of nuclear weapons?
No, as a general matter, we have not seen China express interest in arms control agreements in this area.
And General Berrier, we've seen reports that Russia is providing China with plutonium for Chinese fast breeder reactors. In fact, it was reported by a UK think tank. They noted that between September and December of 2022, Russia provided 7 times more highly enriched uranium to China than the United States and the International Atomic Energy Agency have secured over the past 30 years. What are the implications of that increased level of cooperation of their nuclear programs?
The layers of cooperation between China and Russia go very, very deep. I cannot speak to the specifics of the uranium aspect of that, if true. It's an acceleration of programs and development and technology transfer.
And Director Haynes, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Is there any movement within the administration to look at, first of all, to set up agreements again with Russia? And is there any, I would say, false hope by this administration to believe that they could pull in Russia, let alone trying to pull in China in those talks?
I couldn't speak to that just because it's obviously in the policy community, and I'm not sure I would know, frankly, what it is that they're looking at.
Okay, thank you. Also, Director Haynes, looking at Afghanistan, do you assess that ISIS-K still seeks to conduct external operations against the United States, our forces, and our allies and partners?
Yes.
Do you agree with the assessment that we had in March from General Kurilla about how long it would take ISIS-K to generate the capability to conduct external operations? He told us at that time that any operation between or against the United States and Western interests abroad could happen within 6 months with little or no warning. Would you agree with that?
I'd have to take that back, to be honest. There's been a number of developments even since General Kurilla apparently testified on this issue of taking out key external ops folks within ISIS-K, and I think that might affect the timeline. But I'm happy to take that for the record.
Do you feel that we've lost information gathering capabilities and also CT operations in Afghanistan since our withdrawal?
We certainly, the intelligence community has been clear about the fact that we are not able to collect as much information today as we were, obviously, when the troops were in Afghanistan.
How would you, I guess, rate the amount of intelligence that we are able to gather in Afghanistan? Because it's my understanding our CT operations are basically nil. We are looking at hardly anybody on the ground to be able to help. So how do you rate what we are able to get when we're looking at a threat against not just United States interests and persons, but also our Western allies, the growing threats that we're facing there?
To be specific, we'd have to do this, I think, in closed session. But as a general matter, what we've sought to do is to try to, trying to think how to do this in an unclassified way, but develop enough collection opportunities so that we can monitor the threat. It is definitely, as you indicated, degraded from what we had previously, and we can discuss the details in closed session.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Gillibrand, please.
Director Haynes, the DoD and the IC are engaged in cyber operations against our adversaries every day and gain intelligence about how these adversaries operate and intend to operate in the cyber domain. However, in the event of a large-scale cyber attack on the homeland, CISA is in the leading role. How much of your intelligence on, for example, the PRC cyber threat are you able to share with CISA, and how much must remain inside the DoD and the IC?
We share almost everything with CISA, honestly. They get our analysis on these issues. They see the raw intelligence. We have overlap in terms of even intelligence that we get from commercial threat indexes and so on. So it's quite open sharing in that respect.
And when we rely on allies across the globe for operations and assistance, are we able to leverage our efforts with what we do with CISA with those allies?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, we have talked to allies about, for example, recognizing that so much of the critical cyber threat information exists in the commercial sector because we're trying to see how it is that adversaries are attacking them. We have talked to allies about working together in order to obtain and leverage each other's commercial threat information where that's permitted based on the agreements that we have with the commercial sector, and working with CISA to ensure that they have access to that information. That's an example of working with allies and partners in a way that can help CISA to better have, the landscape and the picture that they need for the work that they do.
And in the event of a substantial cyber attack by China on our domestic infrastructure, what would the chain of command look like in terms of defense and response?
I think it would depend on, this probably is not the best question for me, but I think it would depend on where the response is being conducted and how they're approaching it. Obviously, the president is the final authority in any event, but how it would work through the system, I suspect, might have some differences.
Lieutenant General Barrier, on the same question.
Nothing to add to that, ma'am.
Our government often talks about how our allies and partners are strategic advantage. From the perspective of China, Russia, and Iran, who are the allies and partners they are most concerned about building closer relationships with, and how would building closer relationships with those countries impact regional deterrence? And as context, I recently took a trip to the Middle East to study the impact of the Abraham Accords on UAE, on Morocco, Bahrain, and Israel. And with regard to that, obviously there was concern when Saudi Arabia decided to engage China in their negotiations with Iran. What is the impact of being able to bring Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords in the context of the larger question?
And Senator Gillibrand, forgive me, I missed the very first part of your question. Can you just repeat the first sentence?
Just that we often talk about how our allies and partners are our strategic advantage. And so from the perspective of China, Russia, Iran, who are they most concerned about? And then as an example, the Abraham Accords, I think, is a very strategic partnership for us that should be seen as very powerful. And how did the recent efforts by China to negotiate with Saudi Arabia and Iran affect that strategic alliance, and whether that was a powerful strategic alliance we should have been pushing for?
Yeah, so I think what our analysts would point to as a general matter would be a whole series of key countries that are sometimes referred to as hedging states that are in the space between, as you indicated, UAE as an example of this in a sense. You know, there may be others. It's probably easier to talk about this in a closed session. But there are a variety of countries where, in effect, they're looking at the United States and China and Russia on the other side, in effect, and trying to diversify their relationship in a way that allows them to maximize their interests while at the same time pursue, you know, sort of economic and other security strategies in each of these spaces. I would say with Saudi Arabia in particular, that and the Abraham Accords more generally, that we do think there's been kind of a value of bringing these countries together under certain circumstances, and that interaction has provided some security benefits to the United States and to others. But I think it's, you know, each case would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis in order to sort of identify what are some of the pros and cons. I'm not sure that was very helpful. Apologies.
Senator, I would say that your question is a bullseye on the discussion of strategic competition and what strategic competition is. We know that China and Russia are seeking partnerships with countries that have historically been U.S. partners, and this is the nature of the changing landscape and the complexity of the environment that I described in my opening statement. And we have to be there, and we have to be a better solution, whether that's through intelligence sharing or other partnerships. I don't think it's a lost cause. I think there's a lot we can do, and I think people see the goodness in what the United States brings, and we have to go forward with that.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Cotton, please.
Thank you both for your appearance. I want to extend my condolences as well to the family of General Stewart, who was a trailblazing Marine. I'm surprised it's gotten to me, the seventh questioner, and no one's raised the fact that Russia's government has accused Ukraine of trying to assassinate President Putin and saying that the United States goaded them into it. Seems like kind of a big deal. Big if true, as the kids say today. Dr. Haynes, what do you have to say about these claims from Russia's government?
Well, obviously, you've seen the Ukrainian government deny their, you know, having engaged in this. And at this stage, we don't have information that would allow us to provide an independent assessment on this.
Okay. General Barrier?
I think it gets after Senator Sheen's comment about misinformation.
Perhaps some grounds to think that maybe these claims are exaggerated. One, do we know that Vladimir Putin doesn't spend the night at the Kremlin all that much? Is that correct, Director Haynes?
Yes.
Kremlin is not like the White House, in other words. It's not the primary residence of the president of Russia. Even if you were there, these drones from the videos I've seen, they do not appear to be the size of weapons that could do significant damage to the Kremlin. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. They also appear to be the kinds of drones that would require relatively close line of sight control, which means someone on the ground in Moscow, which is not known as an open and friendly city to people who are hostile to the Russian government. Is that correct, General Barry?
Potentially from the photos that I've seen, yes.
In most attacks on Russian soil, Ukraine's government has been ambiguous or silent about responsibility for the attacks. Yet in this case, they've explicitly disclaimed any responsibility. Is that correct, Director Haynes?
Yes.
All right. General Barry, I think you might have been onto something when you said that this sounds like misinformation. I want to move on to another matter, Director Haynes, about Mexican drug cartels. They're causing now more deaths in America than we lost every year in the Vietnam War, or every year in America than the entire Vietnam War. In fact, almost twice what we lost in the Vietnam War due to fentanyl alone. Has the intelligence community produced a national intelligence estimate on the threat that the cartels pose to America?
No, we have not, sir.
So an NIE is the most authoritative written judgment on national security matters. Is that correct?
It is an authoritative. I suspect it would be coming on the list. Yes.
Do you have any plans to produce an NIE on the threat the cartels pose to America?
We do actually have something on our calendar that is on transnational criminal organizations, including the cartels in this space.
Thank you. I think that's warranted, and I'll look forward to seeing it. Director Haynes, you mentioned earlier that it will take Russia years to rebuild its ground forces, and I believe you were saying that to express agreement with General Berrier. Is that correct? And General Berrier, you believe it will take years for Russia to rebuild its ground combat forces. Most intelligence agencies inaccurately judged the early days of the war. They thought that Russia would roll into Kyiv very quickly and conquer most, if not all, of Ukraine. General Berrier, was that a result of our intelligence agencies underestimating the Ukrainians or overestimating the Russians?
Senator, I think it was a combination of both.
Okay. When you're making your own operational plans, you have to make assessments about the adversary, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that's true whether you're operating at the platoon level or at the national strategic level.
Yes.
So it's fair to say, based on the fact that we now know we overestimated Russia's capabilities as of last February, and we've seen their forces degraded to the point it'll take years to rebuild them, that they are a much weaker fighting force than we thought 14 months ago, right?
That is what we currently assess, yes.
Shouldn't our operational plans about a potential war with Russia in Europe then be changed to reflect that new understanding?
I think in the purview of U.S. European Command and the Department of Defense, they're looking at all that, Senator.
Yeah. They need to urgently, because one of the reasons we've heard on this committee about the slow pace at which we're delivering certain weapons is that our operational plans require it. And if our operational plan in Europe is based on what we thought Russia was capable of 14 months ago versus what they are capable now, it badly needs to be revisited. Director Haynes, one final line of questions about Russia. They've gotten a lot more aggressive towards the United States recently. We all remember the Black Sea incident when one of their aircraft downed an MQ-9 drone. The head of U.S. Air Force's Central Command recently said that Russia is, quote, increasingly bellicose towards American aircraft in Syria, suggesting they even are looking for a fight. They're spoiling for a dogfight. And then third, the head of European Command, General Cavoli, recently noted that Russian submarines have gotten more active in the Atlantic than they have been in years. One, are there other instances of growing Russian aggression? And two, what's the intelligence community's assessment for why Russia has grown increasingly aggressive in these ways?
Can we address this in closed session?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.